This is Reuters. I'm Frederik Richter in Bahrain at the 2010 Reuters Islamic Banking and Finance Summit. Joining us today is Safta Alam, Head of Islamic Structuring at JP Morgan. Thanks a lot for joining us.
Sure, thank you.
I would like to start by asking you, how do you view the capital markets in the Gulf region at the moment, both in terms of Sukuk and the loan markets?
Well, I think the capital markets are still in the recovery phase. I think there have been a couple of well-publicized events in the last 3 to 4 months that have probably slowed down the recovery, but again, is a function of the natural development of the global economy. It's probably just taken a bit longer to come to this, the market in the GCC than we've seen in other parts of the world. So I don't think that in itself is unexpected. I think it does demonstrate a slight lag that we have in the GCC compared to the rest of the world, which is probably quite indicative of emerging markets in general. I think there will continue to be some uncertainty in the markets, of course, in the near future. But of course, over time, I do expect to see some investor confidence returning. And certainly the stronger issuers, I think, are probably quite well placed to come to the market later in the year.
Yeah. Within the region, are there any particular countries which would be most accepted by investors?
I think traditionally the strongest credits in the region will remain strong credits, and by those I mean Abu Dhabi, Saudi Arabia, Bahrain as well, and Qatar, of course, which have been strong issuers, and I think they will remain strong issuers. I think at the sovereign level, I don't think they've had any significant reasons for investors to have any uncertainty in them. But perhaps, I think as normal in these situations, we'll probably see some activity from the sovereign and quasi-sovereign level before it filters a bit further down the yield curve at the corporate level.
I think it's fair to say that Islamic banks in the Gulf region have been too over-reliant on real estate, and now some of these institutions are struggling after we had a property crash in the region at the end of 2008. What do you see as the way out? Which kind of products do these banks need to develop to diversify their income?
Okay, well, I think you're quite right that regionally there has been an issue of bubbles developing in certain asset classes, which equity and real estate have been two of the main asset classes. And I think that's partly naturally a result of a significant amount of liquidity in a region where there's not a diverse range of asset classes for the liquidity to be invested in. And while these assets in the last few years have been performing very well and giving very good returns to investors, I think naturally they were a home for institutional investors and bank money as well. So I think it was quite natural for money to find its way into these asset classes. I think the correction in the markets that we've seen is, of course, it's always a good lesson to investors, institutional as well as retail. And I think it indicates to everybody the need to try to diversify risk, look for asset classes that perhaps have slightly different long-term results.
Do you think a regional diversification would also help them? Should they maybe be looking at the markets in Southeast Asia, such as Malaysia and Indonesia, which also have Muslim populations?
I think for Islamic investors, I think it certainly makes sense for them to look at regions where they see some affinity, whether it's Muslim populations or Islamic banking that has developed. And Southeast Asia is a region where Islamic banking has been developing very fast for a long time. There's very deep and established markets there. So Malaysia, for example, and Indonesia, I think are good markets for investors to look at who are looking for some regional diversification, perhaps away from the GCC.
Yeah. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you, Frederick. Thank you.
That was Safta Alam, Head of Islamic Structuring at JP Morgan. At the 2010 Reuters Islamic Banking and Finance Summit in Bahrain. I'm Frederik Richter. Thank you very much for joining us.